Attention timeshare owners. This is an urgent consumer alert from the Timeshare Exit Hotline, a national company specializing in helping consumers legally get out of their expensive timeshare contracts. We're offering you a way to legally get rid of your timeshare. So if you're fed up with the maintenance fees that keep on coming and want to learn if you can terminate your timeshare legally and permanently, call today. Even if you've tried before and were unsuccessful in getting rid of your timeshare, call today and see if we can help. We offer a complete 100% unconditional client satisfaction guarantee. Make this completely free call and learn how we can help you legally put an end to your timeshare nightmare once and for all. You have nothing to lose, so call right now to qualify and receive a free consultation. You can terminate your timeshare legally and permanently, but you've got to call now. Call the number on your screen today. It's a free call.
Hey, AMP News Patriots, join us in saluting the unwavering heroes who rush towards danger and are always there when you need them. Presenting the First Responder 911 Foundation Challenge Coin, masterfully crafted by our artisans to pay tribute to our heroes. Own this beautiful memento of our gratitude for your support while celebrating their courage and their dedication. For only $29, you can support those who serve and protect. Secure your challenge coin today at firstresponder911.org. Order yours now.
Listen, if we even think you owe us money, you won't know what hit you. We'll put liens on everything you own. Raid your bank accounts, retirement fund, pension. You'll open up your paycheck and cry because we'll already have the money. We'll haul you into federal court and you might even go to jail. Hey, it's our job.
Don't fight the IRS alone. The Tax Doctor is here to help you negotiate your tax bill and reduce your stress. Our experts will fight for you using IRS guidelines to stop any IRS actions like bank levies or wage garnishments. Plus, eliminate penalties and interest and reduce your past tax bill so you pay the IRS less. Help is here to deal with the IRS to reduce your stress. If you owe $10,000 or more in back taxes, do not call the IRS alone. Call a tax doctor now for a tax emergency analysis.
I'd have my mom call the number on the screen. You come see me alone. We'll work it out. Really, we will.
Hello, everybody. Mark Schaftlein with you, and this is the Schaftlein Report. It's Tuesday's edition, and we are broadcasting across the country from Irvine, California to the great state of Iowa. Jason Bermas, welcome to Schaftlein Report. Happy to have you on today.
Well, it is a pleasure to be with you, Mark.
Hey, Jason, you and I, it seems like every time we're on the network, crazy things are happening. The news is going haywire, and we have a lot of that happening today. Jason, I'm starting to get a feeling, and I call it, they've called it the Trump derangement syndrome. They every name you could think about with Trump. But Jason, I'm starting to get a feeling that 2024 is shaping up a lot like 2016. The Democrats have gone through the steps of denial, acceptance. Now they're in like the fear stage. And when I see people like Al Hunt, a noted liberal for decades, coming out in a column basically saying Biden needs to step aside, Jason, there's a lot going on that's propelling Trump. What are your thoughts? And are you getting the same vibes I am? You're in the, literally the heart of the country where the Caucases are going to be. What kind of mood are you seeing, feeling among the people?
Well, I'll tell you right now, Trump was here in my neck of the woods just 5-10 minutes away last week over at the River Center. That's actually where I call my pro MMA fights. And then he went down to the Front Street Pub. And that's actually when I first moved here to Iowa about 3 years ago to try to escape the COVID 1984 nightmare. That's where I was meeting like-minded individuals that were trying to resist the restrictions and authoritarian mandates that were going on. In fact, the owner was amongst those meeting, and the guy's a rock star. You cannot deny it. Even the mainstream press, MSNBC, CNN, are admitting that he is dominating in the polls, at least on the Republican end. And quite frankly, I think they're making it too close and gaming the system when he goes up against Biden, because we're really in an unprecedented year. Most of the country realizes, whether you're a liberal, a conservative, you're somewhere in the middle, you're politically homeless, that Joe Biden runs nothing. And yet, they have not announced who will be his successor. And at this point, there will be a successor, whether it's before the election or after the election. Kamala Harris has obviously been super ineffective, and they haven't been able to push her via the mainstream media. And I know you're seeing it. The push for Gavin Newsom is a real one, along with their establishment candidate, Ron DeSantis, and also Nikki Haley. That's what I'm seeing. I'm seeing the most bizarre presidential election of my lifetime, and that's saying something.
Well, I mean, if you think about it, I think most of the American people, when you aggregately put them all together, they don't want either one of these candidates. However, they're looking at an 81-year-old. I don't want to be insulting to the president, but he looks every bit 81 and maybe higher. And younger voters, people of color, African Americans, the 18 to 25-year-olds, Jason, they are not buying what he's selling. I mean, with crime up everywhere, 6,000 people a day coming across the border. We got an inflation number out today, only up 0.1%, but it's up 3.1% year over year. And that's on top of 9% inflation the year before that. Young people can't buy houses. They're looking at conflicts around the globe. We got conflicts in Russia, Ukraine, Israel, Hamas. And people are looking at them saying, you know, Trump's a jerk. I don't really like him. But you know what? When he was president, there weren't two wars going on. I could fill up my gas tank cheaper. Gas was less than $3 a gallon. I didn't have to worry about being shot every time I walked around a street corner in a major city. And people weren't walking into stores and just stealing stuff. Jason, I know that you and I are on the conservative side, but I don't care whether you're conservative, liberal, or in between. Those are some pretty powerful issues. And everything Joe Biden does, it sticks to him like glue. Whereas how in the world it happened, but the DC establishment, the prosecutors, these crazy charges in New York, they've made Trump a sympathetic figure. How in the world does that happen?
Well, I think that there's a lot of things going on. First of all, nobody can be blind to see that the country has not been on the right track. And like I said, Biden is running nothing. You know, you look at somebody like Vivek Ramaswamy, and he's really the only one that's addressing all of the issues that you just stated in a truthful manner. And this is why I'm really suspect on these polls. They have him polling at about 5% when it's been obvious to me and most people that he has dominated those debates. I say he's well above Chris Christie. And although I see a YouTube ad every minute for someone like DeSantis and Haley, they are extremely unlikable and really are trying to be pushed by what I would call the neocon establishment. Look, I'm politically homeless. I'm about right and wrong, not about right and left. Obviously, the conservatives have been telling a lot more truth in the past decade, and that's why I've gravitated to that end. But I want to speak to one thing that's mainline, especially with the young people you were talking about, and the housing issue. So I don't watch a lot of television, but I do watch a lot of fights. And this weekend, while I was watching the fights on ESPN Plus, which is a Disney company, they usually hammer home the same set of ads over and over and over and over again. And this one went something like this: get a job, save some money, get a loan, buy a house, pay back the loan. And they would do this through the 50s, the 60s, the 70s, the early 2000s, showing a couple of that time period. And then they get to the 2020s, and it's a young girl taking a selfie of herself, get a job, save up some money, get denied for that loan, find 3 roommates, and rent a house. And then they say, it's only this generation that's going to get us out of it. You know what the tagline was and the advertisement was for? Coinbase. They are certainly trying to move the youth into a digital direction when it comes to currency. And really, Coinbase is at the apex of that. And that's in the forefront with government regulation on the back end with CBDCs and really investment firms, as you know, getting these ETFs going on big crypto such as a Bitcoin and of course Ethereum. So the times they are a changing.
Yeah, and we've talked about that on your show before, Ethereum and Bitcoin, and it is happening, as these institutional funds come to fruition on those type of assets. Let me ask you this. You're in Iowa. Okay, they're going to be voting there in a few weeks. The polling I'm looking at, which is public polling, showing Trump over 50%. And contrary to the media trying to pull Nikki Haley past the finish line at every step of the way, Ron DeSantis is, by my polling numbers, still in second, and he's a little bit above Nikki Haley. And those seem to be the numbers in New Hampshire, too. I know Governor Sununu is going to come out and endorse Nikki Haley. You're right there in Iowa. Jason, just in a quick description, most of the time people go to vote. They go in a booth, they pull a lever, they fill out one person, one vote. Briefly explain the caucus system and how it could affect different candidates.
Well, first of all, you have to be a registered Republican to be part of this primary system. And like you said, it is one person, one vote. I think the polls are low. I think that you're going to see Trump in Iowa take 60 to 70% of that vote. I know a lot of people are going to say I'm crazy on that, but I think if we have a free and fair voting system, which, listen, Iowa is far from the worst. It is not perfect, but it does have a set of checks and balances, unlike some of the other states out of there. Like you said, it's a caucus. It's not exactly that same system of others. And then basically they're going to come in, they're going to have a roundabout, and then they're going to decide who that candidate's going to be. I predict that Vivek Ramaswamy probably gets over 10% and maybe even upwards of 15 and 20%. Where would that leave DeSantis and Haley? A very disappointing 10 or below percent. Now, I don't know that this is going to happen. This is my prediction. This is my feel. But whenever I'm talking to somebody who is, maybe a little bit sick and tired of Trump, wants some young blood, they're leaning towards Ramaswamy. And quite frankly, it is my generation of the 40-somethings and under that are leaning that way. I think he's run a very good campaign. But I'm going to tell you right now, Trump is still the dominator, even in my age range. A lot of people do not realize how much he did resonate with that young conservative crowd, and they've kept up with it. We have to remember that this guy was a celebrity on levels we can't really comprehend for decades before he even talked about running for political office and then eventually doing so. So I'm seeing primary system, at least here in Iowa, Trump running away with it, 60 to 70%. Everybody else picking up where he left off. And hopefully Ramaswamy coming in at a respectable second with a 15 to 20% marker.
If Ramaswamy comes in second with hitting the numbers that you're talking about, in my opinion, the race is done. Because they'll go into New Hampshire. Trump will win New Hampshire. Despite Sununu's endorsement, he's going to win New Hampshire, Jason. Then they go to South Carolina and Nevada. How is Nikki Haley going to stay in the race if she can't win South Carolina? That's going to be a challenge. I'm not saying she won't. Look, she's a very talented person, and she's done nothing but good for Republicans. We're fans of Nikki Haley. But at a certain point in time, Jason, the reality is going to set in. And when people look, just like these reports that came out today, inflation is still eating their paycheck. Just like you talked about, they can't buy houses anymore. And look at the assets going up. The cryptos are going up. Gold's hitting all-time records. Folks, I'll tell you something. Jason and I both know Dr. Kirk Elliott, and I got to tell you something. I have no issue at all putting X percent, whatever you're comfortable with, of your assets into crypto, into gold. You pick it. But to keep everything in the way it is and the way it used to be, I don't think so. We're going to be back in a minute after a couple messages, one from Kirk and one of our sponsors.
The world is about to shift. Banks are going cashless globally with the emergence of central bank digital currency, which will bring with it programmable money and the ability to turn on or off your purchasing power based on your digital social profile. It's like the equivalent of spyware in your bank account. You need to get out of the system with the world's safest and most private assets, silver and gold. Call Kirk Elliott, PhD, 720-605-3900.
We are here to defend democracy for the people.
Folks, welcome back, and we're with my friend Jason Bermas, host of Making Sense of the Madness. Jason, coming into 2024, we have a very unique situation here. Jack Smith, shockingly, he can't abide by the normal course of action of courts and appeals courts. What is he doing trying to push this thing to the Supreme Court before it even gets started? What do you make of this?
It's full spectrum attack. That's what I make of this. They're going at every single avenue, not just to try to take Trump down and actually put him in prison, but to try to win the court of public opinion, make media headlines. This is not about justice. This is about lawfare. And that's why you see so many people being entangled into all of these cases. You know, Jack Smith, when you look at the Georgia case in particular, you've obviously had big names that were charged with all sorts of crimes that if they wanted to defend themselves against legitimately, they would have been spending millions, if not tens of millions of dollars against an establishment that literally has unlimited resources and is willing to use them. So what headlines do you get? Oh, they're guilty of this or pleads guilty to that, even though they're much lesser charges and they get this to go away in a sense. You know, I was listening to Alex Jones, of all people, last week, and they've ensnared and subpoenaed him. He revealed this on his Tucker Carlson interview in the Georgia case. And we know when they first announced their first round of indictments there, they said they had 30 other people of interest. So what I'm seeing is these cases coming to a crescendo and starting to take off during the primary season and them running them through 2024, trying to put him in prison. But if that fails, getting enough momentum in the court of public opinion that maybe they can steal the election once more in 2024 if they can't get him off the ballot entirely, Mark.
I think you're right about that, and I'm going to add this to it too. Look what's happened to Trump every time these indictments came down. He went up in the polls. I'm going to give you a prediction, folks, and if Donald Trump literally was convicted and they were going to put him in jail, his approval numbers would skyrocket because, again, fair-minded independents and conservatives, they're not buying this crap. And Jason, this leads me to our second major candidate, assuming he stays in the race. President Biden is staring down the possibility of a real impeachment inquiry because, contrary to what the media is saying, and I hear it all the time, oh, there's no evidence. It's all Hunter. There's nothing linking Joe Biden here. No, that's not what the bank records show. Jason, I mean, could we have a presidential race? Again, we got Robert Kennedy in. We've got a few other, Jill Stein, Cornel West. There could be more. We could have the two leading candidates, though. Literally, one could be facing impeachment. The other could be fighting to stay out of jail. I mean, this is insanity going on. No pun intended.
And, you know, you mentioned the alternative candidates, and RFK Jr. is really a viable candidate to take away votes, possibly from both major candidates. And, you know, you mentioned that Cornel West is another one. Mark Cuban's name has now been thrown around as a possibility. You know, like I stated before, this may be death by 1,000 cuts. And in order to get somebody in like Biden, they would project that an RFK Jr. could take away 10, 15%. In fact, the media hype train has even said that if Ramaswamy doesn't make the next debates because the polling isn't there and he can't even really get into the primary system of the Republicans, he might run as a libertarian. So again, 2024 is the most bizarre presidential election literally in American history. And another thing that you didn't mention is by the time we get to 2024, there is the possibility of a conviction in one of these cases, and Trump would literally be running out of a federal prison. I mean, the times are completely unprecedented. I think that this is going to be a super interesting year. Obviously, in the next 6 to 8 weeks, we'll start to see how this primary system goes through. But once we get to the general election, it's going to be eye-opening to see how many names are on the ticket and how the media is describing those names and what the polling numbers are. Because look, we got to admit to ourselves that the media has created a reality, an illusion amongst a certain sect of people. Now, a lot of us have awoken from that illusion, but the bottom line is they used it to install a dementia-ridden puppet, I'll be nasty about it, who was an establishment hack politician and company man before that, and then they militarized DC after the fact, Mark. I mean, we have to take that into account too. They've lied to the public again and again about January 6th. Finally, we're getting the raw footage that has eviscerated that narrative, but nobody has served justice. And guess what? Those January 6th defendants, some of them serving over a decade, even 2 decades in prison for doing essentially nothing, some not even showing up, Tario amongst them, are still being upheld. And really the only major candidate that has made a statement about it is Ramaswamy, and Trump has leaned into the fact that he would look at it, but he hasn't said, yes, I'm going to pardon these people.
Well, and let me tie that into some things. You mentioned January 6th. Let me tie you into some that just happened recently. And I want to have one other comment on the candidates. We haven't even mentioned the possibility that Joe Manchin could run on the no label side or somebody else. So think about that, folks. You literally could have 6 or more candidates. And Jason, I've seen polling with Kennedy 18, 19% and growing. So I think to discount anybody at this stage of the game is fool's gold. And the dynamics that are going to play out, folks, I mean, it is going to be fascinating. But I want to come back to some things we saw on Capitol Hill last week. Were you as disgusted as I was when to see those 3 university presidents up there? I was saying this. What if students at Harvard had come out and said, we're going to lynch all the blacks. We're going to take and round up all the You think those university presidents would have been silent? But when it came to Jews, my God, it was just like, it's free speech. You know, we can't do anything to harm free speech. Now, one of them's gone, 2 of them are still there. I think the president of Harvard is still there because they don't want to concede that if they forced her to resign, that they had to do something wrong. Give me your thoughts on that, because that, to me, that was an embarrassment to the country, what happened.
Well, to me, Harvard University has really been nothing but an establishment name with their ties to the Central Intelligence Agency and other think tanks, et cetera, for such a long time. So for me to see this, it wasn't really a big shock. I'm of the volition. I'm a free speech absolutist. So if these people want to sit up there and say whatever, that's on them. I haven't seen a lot of accountability in this country. And look, I think that, number one, I'm amongst the idea that I want this thing to end. I don't want an escalation into more turmoil in the Middle East, into involvement with Iran. And quite frankly, I've taken the same position with Ukraine and Russia. I'm very frightened about what Tony Blinken is saying, that if they don't get this next round of funding, well, we're just going to have to send U.S. troops. And we're going to act like we haven't had the Central Intelligence Agency in Ukraine since 2014. We're going to act like we haven't had U.S. special forces and mercenary groups directing the operations there during this last conflict. No, we're just going to outright send our troops on behalf of NATO. So when people have to pay the price politically here in this country, I think it's few and far between. I know there's been some advocates out there that have been very vocal in the Harvard situation. Former Harvard alum Alan Dershowitz amongst them, writing op-eds for the Daily Mail and beyond. But I think that we're in a place, and by the way, I think that this whole situation, no matter what you're taking it, has hurt the Biden administration. Now, the media isn't taking that angle, but it's true. You know, I had a guest on my show talking about Assange today and saying, look, a lot of the progressives that are on the side of the Palestinians are disgusted with what the Biden administration does. Meanwhile, when you look at the conservative end, obviously Trump is a no apologies, pro-Israeli guy, made Jerusalem the capital over there. So he certainly has that base. I'm just hoping, again, that we can get some diplomacy before the 2024 elections, seeing it so far off, and that we don't allow ourselves to slide into an escalation. Because, Mark, I don't know if you've read the articles, but U.S. Special Forces were actually in Israel on October 7th, running separate drills or whatever. And then more U.S. Special Forces have been sent there since. So I'm a de-escalation guy. I don't want to bring Iran into this. And quite frankly, if we had an attack like the one, even in a smaller scale, in a different referendum in the United States or in Europe, we might not even see a 2024 election. And that scares me, Mark.
Yeah, I'm with you on a lot of those points, but I think I don't really have a problem with Republicans tying border security to this aid package, because we've got a porous border. And you know what? Stand up and get a spine. I mean, forever, the Democrats have gotten their way on these spending initiatives. And a lot of people are saying, well, you can't hold Ukraine hostage. You can't hold Israel hostage. Believe me, the Israelis are doing just fine right now. Thank you. I have, based on the news clips I see, rocket launch sites being destroyed, the whole Gaza territory basically being leveled. When the media is complaining about Israel winning, they're doing something right. And I think Iran's looking at this saying, we don't want any part of that right now, because the inevitable, folks, is that Hamas is going to lose. Israel's going to win. Now, Ukraine, different situation. I am aware of some of that intelligence, and unfortunately, I can't talk about some of it because I've seen it. But I know this, Zelensky's in town to make his pitch in Washington, D.C. Jason, do you think, is that going to move some people, or are Republicans going to keep a spine and say, you give us real border security, and then we'll consider the aid?
I think they're probably going to, one way or another, get the finances in indirectly or directly, one way or another. I can't see them sending U.S. troops unless, like I said, something happens here or in Europe. But like you just said, the border is wide open. And again, this is not a traditional run on that border where most of these people are coming up from Mexico or even South America. You literally have flights from around the world, the Middle East, Africa, China in particular, taking them down into South America so they can make that journey across the border. And I would argue it would be very, very easy at this point to even run a false flag type operation in this country, blame it on an entity, and hey, Raytheon, Lockheed Martin make a lot of money, and then all of a sudden our constitutional republic is in jeopardy. I'm not saying that we could have martial law in this country, but we've never been so close. When, again, it was so disturbing to me, Mark, a guy that's been to D.C. dozens of times, loves some of the historical nature there, to see it fenced in and militarized like some third world banana republic, really disturbing. So I put nothing past these people. And again, I hope that we have solutions. I hope you're right, and that the Republicans stand their ground and say, no, we're not going to give them this money. And really, I hope that we can figure out, like Donald Trump said, what are we really doing in NATO? And if NATO is not beneficial to our country, to America
10
first,
seconds, Jason.
Find a way out.
Jason, your opinions are spot on. Thank you for being my guest today. Look forward to seeing you on Making Sense of the Madness. That's it for today, folks. See you on Thursday.
Banks are supposed to be the safest placeholders for cash in the world, but in 2022 that changed. The Federal Reserve pulled out $2.5 trillion of liquidity out of the banks, and the Fed also changed the requirements so banks don't need to keep any funds on hand. This means banks are starved for liquidity and have now become very dangerous places to hold your assets. Get out of the system with the world's safest and most private assets, silver and gold. Call Kirk Elliott, PhD at 720-605-3900.